Hi, thank you for joining us here at Tax Talk UK, where we talk about all things tax and consider other important aspects that you need to know about if you're working for yourself. So today I'm going to talk about some top tips for completing your self-assessment tax return. Before I do, if I could please ask you to take a moment to subscribe to our YouTube channel. That way you'll easily be able to refer back to this information if you need to, as well as being able to find other information that we have available on a whole wide range of topics, all aimed at helping you in your self-employment. So back to self-assessment tax returns then. So of course we're in December now. The deadline is the 31st of January. So this is in the forefront of a lot of people's minds who haven't yet submitted their self-assessment tax returns. So my first tip is to get your tax return submitted as soon as possible. The 31st of January is the deadline. But rather than thinking of that as something to aim for, you can do your tax return now, get it out of the way. Of course, leaving things till the last minute does put us under increased pressure, causes extra stress. If we're missing some information that's going to take a little while to get a copy of, and then there's the risk of the return being late. Of course, you could be unexpectedly taken ill, have some other sort of emergency, and so this is why that would be my first tip, would be to get your tax return completed as soon as you have all of the information together, which leads me on nicely to my next tip, which is to get all of the information together before you come to complete your self-assessment tax return. So of course, as we've talked about in depth in other videos, your self-assessment tax return is where you're reporting to HMRC all of your income from all of different sources. So whether that be interest, dividends, PAYE, your self-employed profit, all sources, any income that you've had will need to go on the tax return. And so if you've got all of that information together before you come to submit your tax return, that will make life much easier. Now, the deadline for being able to submit a paper return has already passed now for the 21-22 tax year. So you don't actually have any choice. But my next tip is generally to submit online if you can. The reason being is that when you submit your tax return online, the first few pages are what HMRC refers to as tailoring questions. So they're asking you specifically about the types of income, and then that means that you won't be shown the questions that aren't relevant. You'll only be shown the questions that are relevant to you. And if a question still isn't relevant or there's nothing to report, then you can leave that blank. In most cases, if you try to leave a compulsory question blank, then the portal won't allow you to progress. So you're quite safe that you will be prompted to not miss anything out. So on that basis, it's important that you understand all of your income, so that you know which income you're saying, yes, I have that, no, that I don't have that, and where you will find that information, so that again you can have that all to hand. So my next tip is to make sure that you've got plenty of time when you come to submit your tax return. We all know that when we're doing something against the clock that we're not that familiar or we're having to refer to other things, can lead to either mistakes in a way that means that we can't submit the return, which is very frustrating, or inaccuracies in the return. And of course, the whole point of submitting a self-assessment tax return is to accurately be telling HMRC all of the income that you have received. So following on then from making sure that you've got sufficient time to carry out the task of submitting your tax return, my next tip is to make sure that you are reading the questions correctly. Just take the time to fully read the question and to make sure that the answer you're giving is the information that is being asked. This is sort of quite common for people to not read the question properly and then not to give the correct information, which again will lead to inaccuracies in the return once it's submitted, or potentially not being able to submit the return because the information is contradictory, perhaps if you haven't read the question properly. And then my final top tip is, once you get to the end of your self-assessment tax return, take the time to read your tax calculation as provided at the end of the once you've answered all of the questions. So the top part of the tax calculation is going to be a summary of all of the income that you've reported to HMRC. So you will know what income that you've had. So this is a good indicator as to whether you filled the return in correctly, to just another sort of safety plan to make sure that there's been no errors. Is that income as you expect it to be? Is it what you have earned throughout the year? And then, of course, the tax resulting, again, another indication. If you've forgotten, for example, to include tax that was deducted at source, your tax calculation, the liability may look unusually high. Are you a sole trader and missing Class 2 national insurance? All of these things, know what you expect to see on that tax calculation. Have an idea in your head of what you expect to see as your total income, that reflects accurately what you've received in the year, and that your tax liability. Sometimes it's simply, unfortunately, a case that you've not not kept on track of the liability through the year, and it's simply higher than you was expecting. But sometimes it can just prompt you to check if you're a CIS contractor, a subcontractor, sorry, for example, and you've missed off your deductions. So that tax calculation at the end is an important piece of information to make sure, as well, of course, as reviewing the information generally that you have included in your self-assessment tax return. So hopefully these tips will help you to successfully file your self-assessment tax return. And of course, if you do find it very difficult and you're not confident that you're completing the right information, and it's not simple questions that you're stuck on, then of course it's perhaps time to consider engaging the services of a tax advisor to submit your self-assessment tax return for you. And of course, as we always say, if you are engaging any professional services, please do make sure that the person is qualified for the services that you're engaging them for, that if applicable, they are a member of a professional body, and that they have professional indemnity insurance. But hopefully you will be, the tips will help you if you are competent and confident to submit your tax return yourself. Thank you very much for watching. And as I mentioned earlier, please do take the time to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you. Goodbye.